It's just another simple day, a sunny day, and you decide to walk to the nearest coffee shop to enjoy your favorite latte. You walk across the concrete road, the grass, and maybe even some mud. As you walk, you are wondering why chicken breast is good protein rather than watching your step. You arrive at the coffee shop, place your order, and put your coffee cup on the table, maybe just to take a picture of it. While drinking, you feel an itch on your leg and decide to scratch it. And just like that, your NQ counts increases by 5. What is happening? One is on the road, just chilling out on a sunny day. One is on the grass, maybe finding some foods. Another is struggling to get out of the mud. There's one on the table, attracted by a drizzle of caramel. And the last one, it was happily crawling up to your leg. Yeah, it's that easy to find ants. Not using my brain, the total surface area of Earth is 510.1 million square kilometer. The total land surface area is 149.9 million square kilometer. Well, guess what? The total number of ants is 20 quadrillion. So if ants were evenly distributed on land, which is quite impractical, but since I do not have actual information on their actual distribution, I will assume they are evenly distributed from now on. Doing some maths, on average there are over 133,000 ants per square meter of land. Even in just 1 square centimeter, there are about 13 ants. If you stand still, you are likely covering thousands of ants with just your feet. No matter where you look, you are almost guaranteed to see an ant instantly. Unless you live in Antarctica since you were born, you must have at least killed one ant, accidentally or with intention. Back to the topic, you didn't mean to kill them, you didn't even know they were there. But does that make you responsible for the killings? Legal responsibility is often tied to intent. If you deliberately stab on an ant, there's no question that you caused its death. But what about when it happens accidentally, with the intention or awareness of you? Does the lack of intent free you from responsibility, or does the simple fact that your action led to its death makes you accountable? And if unknowingly stepping on an ant makes you responsible, does walking on grass makes you a destroyer of nature? If we accidentally harm something, do we bear any moral weight for it? Maybe you have thought this before, or maybe this is the first time this question has crossed your mind. Either way, it challenges the way we define responsibility. Ultimately, we are here to answer one question. Are we responsible for what we did, even when we never meant to? Since the ant is just a representative in this discussion, you can broaden the question to, does accidentally doing something without any intention or awareness makes a person morally responsible for it? Before we get into the video, I will introduce the first philosopher on this topic of accidental actions. He is Aristotle. Aristotle was a Greek philosopher known for his emphasis on empiricism and realism, the idea that knowledge comes from experience and observation. A student of Plato and the teacher of Alexander the Great, he shaped much of Western philosophy. One of his famous quotes is, "Happiness depends upon ourselves." Before we look at how Aristotle answered this question, let's define some key concepts. In Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle categorized actions into 3 types: voluntary, involuntary, and non-voluntary actions. There are moments in life when you might experience these types of actions. Think back to a time when you accidentally bump into someone without intending to and immediately apologize. Yet, despite your apology, you were scolded or even pushed back. In that moment, you might have thought, why should I apologize for such a pure accident? I didn't mean to hurt them, it just happened. However, you can't always escape responsibility by simply saying that something happened naturally. According to Aristotle's framework on intentional actions, some situations can be avoided, while others cannot. We will not discuss voluntary actions in detail as they are 100% morally blameworthy. In these voluntary cases, the agent is fully aware of their actions, and the principle of motion, which is the cause of the action, lies within the agent. There is no external compulsion forcing them to act. Aristotle even argues that actions done out of anger or appetite are still voluntary because the moving principle remains within the individual. Even though emotions may influence behavior, the action is still willed by the person. Aristotle explains, since that which is done under compulsion or by reason of ignorance is involuntary, the voluntary would seem to be that of which the moving principle is in the agent himself, he being aware of the particular circumstances of the action. Now, let's see the differences between involuntary and non-voluntary actions. An action is considered involuntary in 2 scenarios. First, when the action is done under compulsion. meaning an external force is entirely responsible for the agent's action. Second, when the action is done in ignorance and the agent later regrets it. A classic example is a sailor who throws cargo overboard to save a sinking ship. He does not want to throw the good away, but the circumstances force him to do so. Aristotle describes such actions as mixed because although they are technically false, they are still chosen given the situation. Aristotle states, such actions then are mixed, but are more like voluntary actions, for they are worthy of choice at the time when they are done, and the end of an action is relative to the occasion. For the second case, an action done in ignorance is involuntary only if the agent feels remorse upon realizing what they did. If a person unknowingly harms someone and later regrets it, the action is involuntary because regret indicates moral awareness. As for non-voluntary actions, it also occurs due to ignorance, but the key difference is that the agent does not regret the action afterward. Since there is no pain or remorse, it is not classified as involuntary. For example, imagine a man who unknowingly insults someone dear to him. If he later learns the truth but feels no remorse, his action is non-voluntary, not involuntary. Aristotle states, for the man who has done something owing to ignorance, and feels not the least vexation as his action, has not acted voluntarily, since he did not know what he was doing, nor yet involuntarily, since he is not pained. To illustrate these distinctions, let's consider a real-world moral dilemma, driving under the influence, just to mention that we are viewing from a moral perspective, not a legal one. Meet Jack, our protagonist. Jack willingly drinks alcohol, knowing the risk, and still chooses to drive home. He is fully aware of his intoxication and the potential dangers of his action. Unfortunately, he loses control and crashes into another car, injuring a pedestrian. In this scenario, Jack has moral responsibility, because Jack's decision to drink and drive was fully voluntary. He had control over his actions and knowingly took the risk. Aristotle's classification on this is voluntary action. Jack bears full moral responsibility. Jack is at a party and unknowingly consumes a spiked drink. Believing he is sober, he drives home and causes an accident. When he later learns that he was intoxicated without his knowledge, he deeply regrets the harm he caused. In this scenario, Jack has reduced moral responsibility as Jack did not willingly choose to drive while intoxicated. However, Aristotle might argue that he should still have been more cautious. Aristotle's classification on this, involuntary action, because Jack acted out of ignorance and regrets his action. Jack is completely sober and follows all traffic rules. He is driving within the speed limit, obeying signals and paying full attention to the road. However, unknown to him, there is a blind spot where a pedestrian suddenly runs into the street. Jack, unaware of the pedestrian's presence until it is too late, accidentally hits them. When confronted about the harm he caused, he does not feel remorse, believing it was an unavoidable accident. Jack does not have moral responsibility since Jack acted responsibly and was unaware of the pedestrian until the last moment. He cannot be blamed for the accident. Aristotle's classification on this, non-voluntary action. Jack acted in ignorance. He did not see the pedestrian in time, but since he does not regret his actions, it is not considered involuntary. Just to mention again that moral responsibility and legal responsibility are two different things in case of confusion. Moral responsibility in Aristotle's framework depends on intent, awareness, and remorse, while legal responsibility is based on laws, which often impose strict liability for certain actions, regardless of intent. So back to our main topic, and let's use stepping on an ant as an example. Aristotle would say, if you knowingly step on an ant, you are morally responsible for your action. If you step on an ant unknowingly but feel bad afterward, some moral responsibility still applies because your action resulted from ignorance. For example, if you choose to walk in an area where ants are known to reside, even if you do not see them, you bear some responsibility for killing them. If you never realize you step on an ant or simply do not care, then there is no moral responsibility, as there was neither awareness nor intention. This falls under non-voluntary actions. So, to conclude Aristotle's ideas on this topic, moral responsibility depends on intentional choice and awareness. Now, let's welcome Sartre on this topic. Jean-Paul Sartre was a French philosopher best known for existentialism and phenomenology. Influenced by Heidegger, Hegel, and Nietzsche, he explored human freedom, choice, and responsibility. One of his famous quotes is, "Hell is other people." Sartre argues that individuals are always morally responsible for their actions, whether intentional, involuntary, or even accidental. His existentialist philosophy is rooted in the idea that humans are condemned to be free, meaning we cannot escape responsibility because we always have the capacity to reflect and make choices. For Sartre, there is no fundamental difference in responsibility between voluntary, involuntary, and non-voluntary actions. Take the example of stepping on an ant. Sartre would say that the moment you become aware of the action, you are responsible for it. Regardless of whether you feel guilt, you have the freedom to choose how you respond. You can ignore it, dismissing it as an accident. You can feel guilt and commit to avoiding similar actions in the future. You can rationalize it by saying, it's just an ant, to escape responsibility. However, Sartre introduces another concept, bad faith,
mauvaise foi,
which refers to self-deception, when one attempts to flee from their own freedom by pretending they have no control over their actions. In Being and Nothingness, Sartre explains that bad faith arises because humans have the unique ability to both be what they are and not be what they are at the same time. To illustrate this, he gives the example of a waiter who moves too precisely, too eagerly, and performs his job with exaggerated formality. Sartre writes, his movements are quick and forward, a little too precise, a little too rapid. He comes toward the patrons with a step a little too quick. He bends forward a little too eagerly. His voice, his eyes, express an interest a little too solicitous for the order of the customer. This waiter is not merely being a waiter, he's playing the role of a waiter, almost like an actor on stage. Sartre argues that this is bad faith. He reduces himself to his social role, denying his freedom to be more than just a waiter. Similarly, applying this concept to our scenario, if someone steps on an ant and says, "It wasn't my fault, it just happened," they are in bad faith because they deny their freedom to reflect and take responsibility. Sartre explicitly states, bad faith seeks to flee from being into not believing what one believes. This means that the person knows, deep down, that they are responsible, but they lie to themselves to escape the emotional burden of that responsibility. Awareness plays a huge role in Sartre's philosophy. The moment you realize you have killed an ant, even by accident, you are no longer innocent. Whether or not you feel guilt, the awareness itself makes you responsible. If Sartre was standing beside you when you committed such an act, he might say, if you regret stepping on the ant, you are acting in good faith, acknowledging your freedom and responsibility. If you ignore or justify it, you are acting in bad faith, pretending that ignorance can free you from responsibility. For Sartre, moral responsibility comes from awareness, not intention. The moment you realize what you have done, you bear the burden of freedom. Ignorance provides only a temporary escape, but awareness always brings responsibility. The only case where Sartre might say you are not responsible is if you genuinely never become aware of your action. If you never realize you stepped on the ant, you cannot be responsible for something you had no consciousness of. However, the second awareness enters the picture, responsibility follows. Throughout philosophy, the question of moral responsibility has been widely debated. Aristotle might argue that one is not responsible for an unintentional act, while Jean-Paul Sartre would claim that the moment one acknowledges an action, they assume full responsibility for its consequences. But where does Immanuel Kant stand on this issue? To determine whether one is morally responsible for accidentally killing an ant, you must analyze Kant's moral philosophy, which is centered on duty, rational will, and the categorical imperative. Immanuel Kant was a German philosopher best known for his theory of transcendental idealism, which shaped modern philosophy. He influenced later thinkers like Hegel, Nietzsche, and even Einstein. A notable quote of his is, "Science is organized knowledge. Wisdom is organized life." Cultural ethics is deontological, meaning that morality is determined by duty and principles rather than the outcomes of actions. According to Kant, an action is morally good only if it is performed out of duty and guided by reason. The morality of an act does not depend on whether it results in good or bad consequences, but rather on whether it was carried out with good intent and in accordance with moral law. He famously states in Groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals, "Nothing in the world, indeed, nothing even beyond the world, can possibly be conceived which could be called good without qualification except a good will." This means that only a good will, driven by rational duty rather than personal gain or unintended outcomes, has true moral worth. From this perspective, if one steps on an ant purely by accident, the absence of intent means the act does not carry moral blame. Kantian ethics emphasizes that moral responsibility is determined by intent rather than the outcome of an action. The key question, according to Kant, is, did I intend to kill the ant? If the action was unintentional, then there was no deliberate choice to do harm. Since Kant does not judge morality based on consequences, the mere fact that an ant died does not make one morally responsible. To illustrate this principle, Kant differentiates between actions done in accordance with duty and those done from duty. If someone avoids harming animals because they recognize a duty toward ethical treatment, this action has moral worth. However, if someone avoids stepping on an ant merely to avoid guilt or inconvenience, the act lacks moral significance. Another crucial aspect of Kant's philosophy is its human-centered, anthropocentric nature. Kant believed that moral applications primarily apply to rational beings, that is, humans. Since ants, like all non-human animals, lack rationality, they do not fall within the sphere of direct moral duty. While Kant does not grant moral consideration to animals in the same way he does to humans, he does acknowledge that cruelty towards animals could negatively affect human moral character. In his lecture on ethics, he warns, "He who is cruel to animals becomes hard also in his dealings with men." This suggests that while we do not have direct duty to ants, engaging in intentional cruelty toward them could cultivate a harmful disposition, making us more likely to behave immorally toward humans. However, an accidental act does not reflect a character flaw and therefore does not carry moral weight. Kant's categorical imperative provides a test to determine whether an action is morally permissible. The first formulation states, "Act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law." To apply this principle to the case of stepping on an ant, we must ask, can I build a world where everyone who accidentally steps on an ant is held morally responsible for it? This scenario is impractical because accidents are, by definition, unintentional. Holding people accountable for actions they had no control over contradicts Kant's principle that morality is tied to rational choice. Since a universal law demanding moral responsibility for accidents would be unreasonable, it fails the categorical imperative test. From a Kantian perspective, accidentally killing an ant does not make you morally responsible for its death because moral responsibility is based on intent, and accidents lack intent. Since Kantian ethics focuses on duty rather than consequences, an unintentional act does not carry moral blame. The categorical imperative does not support holding people accountable for genuine accidents. A universal law demanding moral responsibility for accidents would be irrational and impractical. Ants are not rational beings, so we do not have direct moral duties toward them. While intentional cruelty toward animals might be discouraged for character-related reasons, an accidental action does not affect one's moral character. Thus, according to Kant, you are not morally responsible for accidentally stepping on an ant. In short, Aristotle categorized actions as voluntary, involuntary, and non-voluntary, based on intent, awareness, and remorse. Voluntary actions are fully intentional, making the agent morally responsible. Involuntary actions occur due to force or ignorance, but remorse is present. Non-voluntary actions also result from ignorance, but lack regret, so no moral responsibility applies. Moral responsibility depends on intentional choice and awareness, distinguishing it from legal responsibility. Sartre argues that individuals are always morally responsible for their actions, regardless of intention, because humans are condemned to be free. Awareness, not intent, determines responsibility. If one knowingly steps on an ant but denies responsibility, they act in bad faith, deceiving themselves to escape guilt. True responsibility comes from acknowledging freedom and choices. The only exception is genuine ignorance. If one never becomes aware of their action, they cannot be responsible. Kantian ethics argues that moral responsibility is based on intent, not consequences. Since an accident lacks intent, one is not morally responsible for stepping on an ant. Kant's categorical imperative also rejects holding people accountable for accidents, as it would be irrational to universalize such a rule. Additionally, Kant's anthropocentric ethics state that moral duties apply primarily to rational beings, which is humans, meaning we have no direct obligations to ants. While cruelty to animals may harm one's moral character, an accidental action carries no moral weight. So, to answer our main question, personally, I believe that actions that occur without intention should not be held morally accountable. Legally, it depends on the law. I can't decide for you. You should form your own perspective after understanding how different philosophers approach this topic. Philosophers often contradict each other because they are based on different fundamental values. While Aristotle, Sartre, and Kant may have different views on whether you are responsible for unintentional or involuntary actions, their ideas serve as a reminder for us to be true to ourselves. Have you ever intentionally killed an ant but later convinced yourself it was unintentional? Or perhaps you pushed someone and excuse it as a reaction in the heat of the moment. The act of lying to yourself is not accidental. It is done with intention and awareness, making you accountable for moral or even legal responsibility if things go wrong. So, be true to yourself no matter what. Don't act in bad faith or deceive yourself, as it makes no difference. Change is a shift in one's fundamental understanding. By the way, our thoughts in this video reflect my interpretation of certain aspects of their works, not everything. So please feel free to correct me in the comments. I appreciate the opportunity to learn and improve. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned a thing or two from this video. If you enjoy Daily Confusion, remember to subscribe for more in the future. Bye!